I'm Kwame Anthony Appiah. I teach philosophy in New York at New York University in the Philosophy Department and in the law school. And this talk is about functionalism, which is a view in the philosophy of mind. I'll be saying later more precisely what the central claims of functionalism are, but for now let me just gesture at the idea by saying that it's the view that mental states are internal states of a person that mediate between the things that happen to you, your experiences, and the things that you do, your behaviour. But to see the point of functionalism, I think it's best to begin by explaining the philosophical challenges that motivated it. So let me start with a scientific question unrelated to the philosophy of mind. Why do I have brown eyes? Now, one sort of explanation would refer to my genes. But my genes aren't something you can see directly. Even if you stained the chromosomes in a cell of mine and looked at it under the microscope, you'd be seeing a mixture of proteins and DNA, but you wouldn't be able to see the sequence that carries the genetic information that tells my eye cells to make the pigment that colours my iris. Philosophers have long been interested in questions about how we can know of the existence of things, like genes, that we can't detect with our unaided senses, our vision, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. These things we can call phenomena, from a Greek verb that means appear. Phenomena are appearances. Now, unobservable entities are often postulated in scientific theories on the basis of the phenomena, like the genetic theory that Gregor Mendel first proposed to explain phenomena like eye colour. So we sometimes call them theoretical entities as well, because they're postulated in theories. Some philosophers worry that because we can't observe these things, we can't really be sure that they're there. It's certainly true that eye colour behaves as if there are inherited particles that obey Mendel's laws of genetics, roughly, but that doesn't guarantee that there really are genes. This is an example of the way in which questions in epistemology, questions about what and how we can know, connect with questions in ontology, questions about what exists, what's really there. The great physicist Isaac Newton, in his Principia, one of the greatest works in the history of physics, wrote about this issue in the sciences, which in his day were called experimental philosophy. Whatever is not deduced from the phenomena, he said, is to be called an hypothesis. And hypotheses, whether metaphysical or physical, whether of occult qualities or mechanical, have no place in experimental philosophy. Now, once you had that view, that the things we believe in but can't directly experience, we have no reason to believe are there, you can see that the problem doesn't just arise with the unobservable things postulated in scientific theories. You can see or hear me talking, and you naturally assume that I have all sorts of things going on in my mind. I'm telling you things that I believe, you'll suppose, because I want you to be able to understand some philosophical ideas. But you can't observe my beliefs and wants. So just as with genes, you can say that it's as if they're there, as if I have beliefs, desires, intentions, and so on, but it's not clear that we can safely infer from that they're really there. So my mental states are what Newton called hypotheses for you. So if you're going to give a scientific account of what's going on in my mind, maybe like Newton, you should avoid these hypotheses and stick with the phenomena, the things you can observe me doing, the observable events that happen around me. Notice that Newton wasn't saying that there weren't any, say, gravitational fields to explain gravitational attraction. He was just saying that a scientist didn't need to refer to that hypothesis. Scientists, he thought, should stick to the phenomena and to patterns in the phenomena. And it's thoughts like these that led some 20th century psychologists, like B.F. Skinner, to argue that a scientific psychology should be behaviourist. Now, the word behaviorism, like many words ending in ism that refer to philosophical attitudes, can be understood in a variety of ways. But Skinner meant roughly that scientific psychology should be about behaviour and the observable environmental causes of behaviour. That was why his theories focused on patterns of stimulus and response in humans and in other animals. He didn't deny that people had internal states, or that they were conscious of some of them, but that wasn't for him what psychology was about. But you can be led to behaviorism not as a result of Newton's view that science should be about the phenomena, which is a view about proper scientific method, but from a more general philosophical skepticism about things that can't be observed. In the 20th century, logical positivists were led to behaviorism by their general view that reality consisted only of things whose existence could be confirmed or disconfirmed by observation. Now, of course, it seems to you, I'm sure, as it does to me, that I have mental experiences like sensations because I am aware of them. Descartes, in the 17th century, famously took thoughts, the things of which a person is consciously aware, to be the one sort of thing whose existence couldn't be doubted. But that only applies to my own thoughts. I can certainly wonder whether someone else is having thoughts right now. I can look at a human body lying on a bed with eyes closed and wonder if the person is conscious. And nowadays, I can wonder whether a body moving around is a person or a cleverly designed robot with no experiences at all. In the 20th century, philosophers posed what they called the problem of other minds. What they asked entitles us, on the basis of behavioral evidence, to conclude that other people or organisms have minds at all. So there's a confluence between a certain concern about the scientific respectability of theoretical entities and a concern about the evidential basis for our belief in unobservable mental states in other people. And one way to see functionalism is as the application of a solution to the question about the status of theoretical entities in science applied to the particular case of the entities postulated in what we might call the theory that people have mental states like beliefs, desires, intentions, perceptions, and sensations. How did this work? Well, the great 20th century English philosopher Frank Ramsey suggested a way to think about the relationship between phenomena and unobservable entities it postulates. Take a body of scientific theory, and let me be clear, when we speak of a theory here, we're not implying that it's especially doubtful, as when someone says, that's just a theory. What we mean is a set of connected claims that offer to explain some of the things that happen in some domain. So let's take a somewhat simplified version of modern atomic theory, the idea that every physical thing is composed of atoms that make up molecules. How can we connect the idea of atoms and molecules, which are unobservable, with the physical things we can observe and that are composed of them? Well, what Ramsey suggested was this. First, collect the central claims about atoms. These will include a lot of sentences about the properties of atoms, like hydrogen has an atomic weight of 1, or hydrogen molecules consist of 2 hydrogen atoms joined by a bond composed of a pair of electrons. Then there will be some sentences that refer to both theoretical entities and phenomena. Hydrogen gas is colourless, odourless and tasteless. Water is composed of 2 hydrogen atoms with 1 oxygen atom, with a covalent bond connecting them. And then there'll be some sentences that are just about phenomena. Sodium metal dropped in water produces heat and bubbles. Water feels wet. What Ramsey proposed was this. Take all these sentences of atomic theory and join them into one vast sentence, then remove each of the terms for unobservable entities, replacing it with what logicians call a variable. For example, in every sentence about a hydrogen atom, we can replace the words a hydrogen atom with the letter H. And each time we talk about an oxygen atom, we can do the same, replacing oxygen atom now with an O. Now, the result of all this we can call the open sentence of a theory. This is the open sentence of atomic theory. Then, in front of the open sentence of the theory, we write for each variable x the words, there is an x such that, and the result here is called the Ramsey sentence of atomic theory. What we've got now is something that's true if and only if atomic theory is true, so it has, in some sense, the same content as atomic theory. But it doesn't rely on knowing the meaning of any terms for unobservables, because we've replaced all those with those letters. Where atomic theory spoke of hydrogen, the Ramsey sentence speaks of the H such that H has an atomic weight of 1, and so on. Now, of course, atomic weights and covalent bonds are both unobservable, so they've been replaced by variables too. And the point is that now we have connected observable phenomena with unobservable entities in a way that shows what patterns among the phenomena have to obtain for the observable entities to be as the theory says they are. And what functionalism does is the same thing with psychological theories. Psychologists these days sometimes speak of theory of mind, and by that they refer to the ideas that everybody has about how our mental life works. And philosophers call this body of ideas folk psychology because it's the way ordinary folk think about how the mind works. Here are a couple of simple claims in folk psychology. When sighted people look at green things in normal circumstances, they usually have a visual experience of greenness. And you can see a few more on the slide there. Functionalism in the philosophy of mind involves writing down all the claims of folk psychology, taking out all the terms for the unobservable states like beliefs and desires, and then defining them by saying how they function, how each mental state interacts with the others in response to the things that happen around the person to produce their behavior. So it takes the strategy Ramsey developed for connecting unobservable entities with the phenomena and applies it to the particular case of the mind. In philosophy, when we make a proposal like this, we have to, as it were, take it for a test run. We need to think about whether there are obvious objections to it. And I think the most obvious objection to functionalism is this. If this is what mental states are, then anything that has internal states that function in these ways has mental states. But surely it's of the essence of at least some mental states, such as perceptions, that there is, as the philosopher Tom Nagel once put it, something that it is like to have them. When I'm having an experience, it has a subjective character. For me, I am conscious of it. Philosophers use the word quale, but whose plural is qualia, to talk about these subjective mental states. But then it seems conceivable that there should be a creature that had states that functioned exactly like mine, but didn't have any qualia at all. Couldn't we make an android double of a human being that did in every circumstance what a human being with a certain set of beliefs and desires and other mental states would do, but lacked consciousness altogether? The philosopher David Chalmers has argued that there could have been creatures, he calls them zombies, that behaved exactly like us because they were molecule for molecule copies of us, but didn't have conscious experiences. Zombies, he argues, wouldn't have had mental life, or at least the kind of conscious life we do. And if there could have been such creatures, then there must be more to having mental states than having functional states. Notice that if functionalism is true, whatever performs the functions assigned to some mental state, whatever performs its functional role in a particular organism, just is the state in question. And that has the consequence that if modern neuropsychology is correct, some of our neural states, the states of our brains, are mental states. So one way to respond to the claim that zombies are possible is to say only that while they are indeed possible, the states that play the functional role of sensations in us are conscious. There is something that it is like to have them, and this means we can't give a functional story about what it is to be conscious. But the functionalist claim is that what makes something a sensation, for example, is that it has a certain functional role. And it's just a separate question whether the thing that has that role in any particular organism has associated qualia. The way qualia have been defined in an account like Chalmers's, they can't be captured by a functionalist account. One possible response to the zombie argument is just to deny that there could be qualia, things that were known to one person, but in principle inaccessible to anyone else. Remember, because the zombie is functionally identical with the person, it'll say, yes, I have qualia, if you ask it, because that's what the person would say. So you can't find out whether a creature has qualia by asking it. But if you think that it makes no sense to postulate entities that are completely inaccessible to others in that way, you'll deny that qualia are possible. Once you think carefully through what is being proposed in suggesting there could be aspects of our mental life that are completely inaccessible to anyone but the person that has them, you may come to think that that idea makes no sense. Wittgenstein was arguing against that possibility in his so-called private language argument. But to explore that would require another talk.